Welcome back to Tabletop Glory. My name is Graham Johnson, and today we're going to be doing an honest review of Maxx Darth. Now, I have some well-deserved criticisms, but we'll get into that at the end. There's actually some promising results here, and I don't think it's user error this time, as well, I've used products like this before, and they all kind of do the same thing, and I was hoping this one was going to be a little different. Let's get into the video. Now, if you're not familiar with what Green Stuff was doing, Maxx Darth was one of their Kickstarters, and it was funded in 3 hours, which I can totally understand why. Now, when I backed it at 60 mils, which I believe this is 12 euros. US dollars, it came out to like 17, 18, something like that with tax, or not with tax, but with shipping. They had some interesting stuff that you could do for some of their expansive editions. If you wanted to get something other than just the paint. That having been said, if you're not familiar with Maxx Darth, and after my video you would like to go pick some up, you can get it from their website. I got the 60 mils. It's also still available in the 17 mils. If you're hesitant at the end of this but still want to give it a shot, I really recommend getting the 17 mils. I do think it's worth getting to play around with it despite my criticisms. Now, they claim that the reasoning behind all of this is they wanted to create the world's blackest paint. Now, I think what's important to say here is that they wanted the world's blackest paint for miniature painting. I have used products like Black 3.0 and Black 2.0, and a friend of mine is planning to get Black 4.0, and I will be trying it as well. And Maxx Darth does pretty much the exact same thing those two paints do that I'm not a big fan of. And we'll talk about that when I can really show it off up close. Now, before we continue this review, just to reiterate what some of the text on screen has said for the sake of clarity, because this is my honest review, and I need to make sure that my words are heard the way that I want them to be heard. It is my belief, and I do really believe that it is their intention and not them attempting to mislead us, that they intended to create the darkest hobby paint available on the market versus the darkest acrylic paint period on the market. Black 2.0 and Black 3.0 both have almost identical descriptions to Maxx Darth, and they both claim to be water-based acrylic paints. And they both do the one thing that I'm not a big fan of when it comes to how paints react in the hobby space, and Maxx Darth does the same thing. So, I am hoping that what Green Stuff World hasn't done is simply repurposed either Black 2.0 or Black 3.0 and is passing it off as their own product. I really hope that's not what's happening. It does do eerily similar things. In any case, let's cut to footage of me actually applying Maxx Darth and experimenting around with it, and I will talk through my thought process of using it for the first time and give you my honest opinions about everything at the end. This is a Firstborn Space Marine that has been primed with Black Tester's enamel primer. Now, this is acting as my litmus test. I've done a very light Incubi Darkness from above just for clarity's sake. These are a commission that I have just started recently. Now, I've grabbed a bunch of different bits out of my bits box here. I've grabbed some 3D printed bases, I've grabbed some Green Stuff World rolled out bases, and I've grabbed a few little bits. And we're just going to apply Maxx Darth to these in various ways. And I end up adding a chunk of a base later on that I end up spraying first with that black testers, basically to see if priming the miniature first makes a difference for the rub test, to see if less rubs off. And spoilers, it doesn't make a difference. The paint in the bottle didn't feel any thicker than average hobby paints, although I did notice that there are agitators in the bottle, which I thought was quite nice. If you've ever used Black 2.0 and Black 3.0, sometimes they can do what's called frosting, and I've been told that this happens when you don't shake up the bottle enough. You'll notice later on when I go to do the rub test, I have a little bit of this frosting effect that happens, and I'll go a little bit more into detail what I mean by that when we talk about that later. But I shook the snot out of this bottle before I started recording, and then shook it again some more before putting it on my palette, and still got this frosting. So I don't think it was user error. I just think that this product does this when it dries, because almost every extreme black product I've used does this exact same thing, and I believe it does this because the texture that it imparts on the miniature allows it to block more light. Now with the first base, I did water it down a little bit more than I thought I needed to, and I end up needing to put 3 coats on the base to give a good even coverage. I apply this more as a wash because I was very curious to see how a wash of this product would pick out all of these details. And even while it was wet, I really liked the way that it looked. And I'm hoping that that means that it would look good the way it is dry, which you'll see later, and with a gloss on top of it, which I plan to test with some of my model train stuff very soon. I went a little deeper into the pile on this one and applied things a little thicker. This is probably about the thickness that I would normally base coat a miniature with if I was going to be applying with a brush and trying to get a nice thick all over even coat. I typically do this when I'm painting larger miniatures like animals as opposed to a space marine or something like that. Now, I wanted to make sure that I did a fair test because this is a fairly flat miniature with limited detail, so I did the exact same thing with a thicker coat with a more detailed base, something that had a lot of texture to it. I wanted to give this thing the benefit of the doubt because at this point in time I didn't know it was going to do this frosting effect when it dries, and I wanted to give everything the best chance it had to succeed. Now, I will say that the more coats and the thicker the coat is, the easier it seemed like it rubbed off when it dried. So there might be a little bit of a fine line there where there's this perfect way of thinning it down and this perfect thickness of putting it on, and it'll just come out perfect. But in a hobby space, I'm not saying a product should just work, but it should at least work half the time. And a product like this, where it's probably going to be used as a finishing product and be one of the last steps, if it's going to frost up and texture up, that could ruin the miniature if you're not prepared for it to do that. But again, I was kind of anticipating that this might happen because I assumed that this product was going to work very similar to other products like this on the market, and I was going off of my own prior experience. Now with this last one, I kind of thinned it down a little bit more, not quite to a wash consistency. This is pretty close to what I would probably thin it down if I was going to put it through an airbrush, and I decided to only paint one half just like I did with the fin, just so that I could get a good idea of whether it would peel up at the edges. Now, I would like to say for the record, besides the base that got the wash treatment, these all took about the same amount of time to dry. I was very impressed with that. And as you can see, despite applying it as a wash, I mean, we got a really nice deep result. However, you'll notice it immediately starts rubbing off the high spots. And your solution to this may be to go ahead and slap a varnish on it, and we'll talk about that here in a second. I feel like there's something that could be done here, whether you base coated everything ahead of time and then put that on top and then wipe to reveal. I feel like there's a lot that you could do there, and I'm excited to do a little bit of more of that in the future. Now, the base on the right and the base on the left have had nothing done to them other than having the black applied, and you can see a quick wipe of the finger just immediately starts to wipe it off. It's leaving a decent dark black behind, but it's wiping quite a lot off. One of the reasons why you're kind of able to just wipe it off, whether it be with a brush or your finger, isn't the fact that it's an adhesion issue. It's this texture, this frosting, as I referred to it as earlier. That frosting doesn't really seem to actually adhere to anything. And Black 2.0 and Black 3.0, when it frosts, does the exact same thing. The black paint that's in it really sticks really well, and you know, maybe if I did 3 or 4 coats and kept wiping off this frosting effect every time, I might end up with a really nice solid black, but I don't think I should be spending 2 or 3 hours just building up that black. So at this point in time, I'm thinking that this is a really great way to finish off a miniature, as opposed to using this as a starting point and then blending out from there. Now, I will give this product one thing. It frosts unbelievably minor compared to other products that I have used. In my personal opinion, 3.0 is one of the biggest culprits of this. 2.0 does a little bit better of a job of not doing it, and it's almost just as good as the black that we're getting here with our Maxx Darth. But yeah, this is just one of those things that I absolutely hate. And just like with Black 2.0 and 3.0, depending upon the varnish you put on top of it, it absolutely ruins it. As you can see here, it's almost silvered and grayed, the Maxx Darth. That shouldn't happen. So I decided to do an experiment, and I applied a varnish with my brush. I went ahead and used a water-based varnish, and I used a matte. And you can see our fin here is really tough now, but it's satin, and it's almost glossy. It's like between a satin and a gloss, and it's not this super deep dark black like we can see in those recesses where I haven't been able to wipe it away. It's very peculiar, because if I were to compare this to our firstborn, our test, our baseline, let's just say if I didn't know any better, I would have assumed that you had taken that tester's black and then just put a satin finish on it. I mean, it looks the same in my eyes. Now again, I'm colorblind, but I'm not colorblind to black. So where do I sit with Maxx Darth? I know it sounds like I did a really negative review, and my reviews tend to come off a little bit on the negative side, but all in all, I think it's a product that's worth having in your arsenal. I can't in good faith recommend the 60 milliliters. Words. I can't recommend a bottle this big. I think it's got a place in our hobby drawer. There are select ways in which I would use it. My biggest of which is going to be in diorama type situations where I'm not going to be touching it again, or on like the inside of a cockpit where I really want to black something out, or if I'm putting lights inside a miniature and I want to make sure that the lights don't bleed through the plastic because it might be a little thin in those places. This is going to do a really great job at blacking out that plastic to make sure light doesn't escape. That also having been said, when it's thinned down really thin, I think this makes a really awesome soot effect. And then caking it on a little bit in places so that it frosts on purpose, I think is a really great way of doing a soot effect, and I definitely plan on doing that on my model railroad. I've got some steam trains that I think this will look really great at, and the exhaust ports on my diesels, I think this will look really great on that as well. I think this is one of those paints that you're going to get out to do specific jobs. I don't think you're going to be using it all the time, which again is why I don't think you need to justify buying this big a bottle. I kind of bought this big a bottle because I wanted to make sure I never had to buy another one again. I think if you apply really thin coats, you'll get your best results, because that's definitely where I found my best results, which means that it probably works pretty great through an airbrush as well. Now, you'll notice I didn't test it with an airbrush, and I didn't test it with an airbrush because I wanted to test this under normal hobby circumstances. I figure most of you out there who might be relatively new to the hobby don't have an airbrush yet, and therefore I wanted to test all of this using a paintbrush because I felt it would be the most relevant to all of you. That having been said, I do actually recommend this product. I think that if you got the smaller bottle, then you'd be pretty set for a long time. I don't think you need this big a bottle. Do I regret buying it? No. Do I regret backing it on Kickstarter? Yes. I actually could have gotten this. This showed up in the mail this week. This week is also the same week it became available to buy online. I could have just bought it online and gotten it next week. So, and I probably would have saved a few bucks if I had done that as opposed to backing it on Kickstarter. But lesson learned, I guess. In any case, guys, I've been Tabletop Glory, aka Graham Johnson. Thank you so much for watching, and may your display case always be filled and your pile of shame never run empty. Until next time.